A man shows up in 1851 claiming to be from a country that doesn't exist. Decades later, people start slipping through time on a random street in Liverpool. And then two couples spend the night in a Paris hotel that vanishes from reality. These are true parallel universe stories that defy reality. In 1851, a man calling himself Jopar Voren was picked up by local authorities in the town of Frankfurt Oder, in what was then Prussia. He didn't speak German fluently, but he understood it well enough to communicate, and what he told them left everyone confused. He claimed to be from a country called Luxaria, which he said was in a region called Sacria, supposedly somewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. Never heard of it? Well, yeah, nobody else did either. It wasn't on any map, it wasn't part of any empire, and it never has been. It didn't exist. But Jopar was dead serious. He said he was searching for his long-lost brother, and when asked to show his documents, he produced papers written in a completely unknown language. He also claimed to be fluent in multiple languages, some of which had no record of ever existing either, like Luxarian and Abramian. Eventually, authorities labeled him a lunatic and sent him off for further investigation, and that's the last the world ever heard of him. There was never any follow-up. If this guy ever really did exist, he probably ended up in an asylum, and if you know anything about mental institutions at the time, you know they were basically hell on earth. Makes sense he was never heard from again. Was this guy mentally unstable though, or is there really a chance that he somehow slipped from an alternate reality, a different version of Earth where Luxaria was as real as Germany? And in this alternate Earth, is there a more handsome version of me doing a video just like this, but talking about how Jopar Voren mysteriously vanished into thin air and was never seen again? In the heart of Liverpool, there's a street called Bold Street. Nothing crazy at first glance, just shops, cafes, people going about their day, but ask around and you'll likely hear whispers about something very strange. People slipping through time. One of the most famous stories comes from 1996. A guy named Frank was walking with his wife near Bold Street. She popped into a bookstore and he strolled ahead to a music shop. As he crossed the street, everything suddenly changed. Modern cars vanished, the noises around him dulled, and when he looked around, he was standing in what looked like 1950s Liverpool. People were dressed in post-war clothes, and there were old-school shop fronts where modern businesses should have been. He even saw a store called Crips, which hadn't existed in decades. A few moments later, the world flickered again, and he was back in the present like nothing had happened. Frank swore that this happened though, and he's not the only one. There are dozens of reports from people who say they've walked Bold Street and wound up in the past. Some just for a few seconds, others for minutes. Is it just a coincidence, hallucinations, or is Bold Street sitting on some kind of weird wrinkle in time, a natural glitch in the matrix, if you will? In 1979, two British couples, Geoff and Pauline Simpson and Len and Cynthia Gisby, were driving through France on their way to a holiday in Spain. While passing through Paris, they decided to stop for the night. They pulled off the main road and found this charming, old-fashioned hotel. Nothing fancy, but it was cozy and heavy wooden furniture. No modern conveniences though, like none. The beds didn't have pillows even, it was just bolsters. The windows had these old wooden shutters, odd but charming in a vintage kind of way. They even had dinner at the attached restaurant, where they were served a very basic, kind of old school meal by staff in these outdated uniforms. The whole night also only cost them about 19 francs total. That's about $21.50 US. Even in the 70s, that was suspiciously cheap. They tried to find the hotel again on their way back through Paris, but it was gone completely. They retraced their route. They asked locals. Nobody had ever heard of this place though. The road they remembered taking didn't seem to exist anymore. They later checked their photos from the trip, but the ones they took of the hotel were gone. They just weren't there. But both couples swore up and down that this was real. So did they spend the night in a building that slipped forward through time, or did they slip backward into some echo of a Paris that no longer was there? In 2009, a guy named James Richards claimed he had a very weird experience in California. According to him, he was out driving near Del Porto Canyon with his dog when it took off chasing a rabbit. He ran after it, tripped, hit his head, and blacked out. When he came to, He was in what looked like a regular room with furniture, but there were also machines he didn't recognize. A man introduced himself as Jonas and said that while on a work-related trip from a dimensional travel agency, he had used the machine to transport the unconscious Richards to this parallel Earth in order to help him. This alternate version of Earth was very similar to ours, but with some key differences. One being that in Jonas's world, the Beatles were all still alive and making music. Naturally, James didn't believe it until Jonas gave him a cassette tape. The label said Everyday Chemistry was a compilation of Beatles songs that didn't exist here. James brought the tape back with him when he returned to our world, and he posted the whole thing on a website he made. The music's on there. It does kind of sound like the Beatles' version of like Pink Floyd's Division Bell, like just music they would have done in their later years. Is this just a really creative art project or a hoax though? Or is there a chance there's really a whole Beatles album online from a parallel universe? Back in the 12th century, the quiet village of Woolpit in England got a visit from two very strange kids. A brother and sister showed up out of nowhere, looking completely lost. They were also bright green, not a sickly green, kind of like Shrek hue. The locals were kind of freaked out, but they took them in. The kids didn't speak any recognizable language. They were terrified of sunlight, and they refused to eat anything except raw beans for days. Now, eventually they adjusted a bit. The boy unfortunately got sick and died not long after, but the girl survived and slowly learned to speak English. And that's when she started telling people some pretty strange things. She said they came from a place called St. Martin's Land, where everything had a greenish twilight and the sun never fully shone. According to her, the two of them had been tending to their father's flock when they heard this loud noise and suddenly found themselves in Woolpit. Were these mysterious green children from some different culture and just got lost, or had they somehow wandered out of a parallel world? In 1957, something terrible happened in the quiet town of Hexham, England. Two sisters, Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock, were hit by a car and killed while walking to church. Their parents, understandably, were devastated, but about a year later, the mother got pregnant again, and in 1958, she gave birth to twins again. Gillian and Jennifer, they named them. Now, from the start, there were some odd things. Jennifer had birthmarks in the exact same place as Jacqueline had them, and as they got older, the twins started asking for toys that had belonged to their dead sisters, toys they'd never seen before. They even knew their names. They also seemed to have memories of places they'd never been, like a school the older girls had attended. One time the twins pointed out a park they claimed to recognize, saying, "That's where we used to play." By the time they turned 5, though, the memories began to fade. The girls grew up like normal kids, eventually forgetting all the strange things they used to say, but their father became convinced that Joanna and Jacqueline had been reincarnated into their twin sisters. Was it a case of parental grief mixing with coincidence, or did something actually transfer over? Like two souls refusing to move on, jumping right back into the same family. A lot of people who've heard this story kinda think so. And that's why the story of the Pollock twins became one of the most famous reincarnation cases ever recorded. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving home late at night in Minnesota when his car went into a ditch near the town of Lind. He wasn't hurt, he was just stuck, so he called his parents around 1:30 a.m. and asked them to come get him. He said he was near Lind. When they drove out there, they couldn't find him. He stayed on the phone with them for nearly 47 minutes, calmly describing where he was walking. Then suddenly, in the middle of the call, Brandon said, "Oh, and the line went dead. That was the last time anyone heard from him. His car was eventually found, but they never found a body, and to this day, Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains completely unsolved. In 1901, two English school teachers, Anne Moberly and Charlotte Jourdain, took a trip to Paris. While visiting the Palace of Versailles, they decided to explore the gardens near the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's old stomping grounds. But as they wandered, something felt kinda off. The air got heavy, the atmosphere changed. The people they passed were suddenly wearing 18th century clothing. One man in a wide brim hat looked downright ghostly even. They claimed the place felt lifeless and surreal, like walking into a painting. But then, out of nowhere, everything snapped back to normal. Later, they became convinced that they had time-slipped straight into pre-revolution France, possibly 1792. They even claimed to have seen Marie Antoinette herself sketching by the grass. They wrote a book about it under fake names, and the story became relatively famous. Some believed it, some said they were just delusional or making it up entirely, but both women stuck to their story for the rest of their lives. Were they hallucinating, or did they somehow catch a rip in time and stumble into the past? There's a patch over the South Atlantic Ocean called the South Atlantic Anomaly, and it's kinda like the Bermuda Triangle but for space. So satellites that pass over it glitch out. Laptops on the International Space Station will sometimes crash. Astronauts report seeing flashes of light even when their eyes are closed. Why? Because in this spot, Earth's magnetic field is weirdly weak, like dangerously weak, which allows more cosmic radiation to pour in. NASA even has to shut off instruments when passing over it because they can't guarantee accurate readings. Some satellites have flat out died after taking too many passes, and here's the freakiest part: the anomaly seems to be growing and splitting. And conspiracy theorists, they got plenty of theories. Ancient alien tech buried under the ocean, a secret underground base, a rift to another dimension, possibly.
To start us off today, let's talk about what exactly a parallel universe is and how they came to be known as mirror worlds. A parallel universe, simply put, is a universe that is similar to our own but also incredibly different. They exist alongside our own but follow their own unique set of laws and physics. They are endless and cover every possible scenario that could ever happen in the history of ever and beyond. I sound like Buzz Lightyear. They could be almost the exact same as our own, with the difference of one person wearing a blue shirt one day rather than a red one. Or they could be vastly different, with oceans and lands existing in completely opposite geographical locations and gravity pulling us up instead of keeping us down. Conversations regarding fate and the nature of free will turn pretty much upside down when the idea of a parallel universe gets involved. It's confusing and overwhelming, but not entirely inconceivable, suggesting that scientifically they definitely don't not exist. And here comes James with an explanation of why they probably do, other than the fact that they definitely don't. You get it.
Why exactly is our universe expanding? Well, a recent study by the Journal of Cosmology and Astroparticle Physics may have an explanation, and it relates to parallel universes. The universe is always expanding, and most scientists believe dark energy is behind the growth, but dark energy has never actually been directly observed. A recent study published in December of 2023 by researchers from the University of Copenhagen and the Tokyo Institute of Technology put forward that our universe might be expanding because it's merging with baby parallel universes. Almost like our universe is this cosmic blob absorbing other smaller universes, kind of like Galactus. Physicist Jan Ambjorn explained that, quote, "The accelerated expansion of our universe caused by the mysterious dark energy might have a simple, intuitive explanation, the merging with so-called baby universes, and that a model for this might fit the data better than the standard cosmological model." Obviously, this is theoretical, but it is interesting and would explain some things. For example, it could explain the rapid inflation of our universe that it experienced right after the Big Bang. Scientists have always believed this inflation was caused by a hypothetical field called the inflation, but the new study suggests that our universe, when it was just a baby, could have been absorbed by another older universe, invites the suggestion that this expansion was caused by a collision with a larger universe. That is, it was really our universe, which was absorbed in another parent universe.
Next up, we have the scientific anomaly of dark matter, which scientists have recently begun to theorize could possibly create, or have already created, invisible parallel universes. You see, a long time ago, scientists discovered Neptune after noticing gravitational anomalies affecting Uranus, causing it to move in a strange way. Since then, scientists have noticed many stars and galaxies moving in ways that don't quite make sense, but unlike the discovery of Neptune in regards to the strange behavior, scientists Scientists have not been able to find any quantifiable reason for the anomaly, and so they theorized that there must be some kind of invisible force pulling on the stars and galaxies, the invisible force likely being dark matter. It is believed that dark matter is made up of tiny particles that have limited, if any, interaction with one another. Basically, it's the complete opposite of regular matter. The particles are shy, so shy in fact that they actively push things away from them rather than pulling things towards them. This is the same force that scientists believe is causing the universe to expand. But wait, there's more. Scientists theorize that it is possible that dark matter is not actually as boring, a relative term, as it seems, and that it might possibly contain an entire sector of hidden particles and possibly even a hidden that is an exact copy of ours, containing hidden versions of electrons and protons, which together create hidden atoms and molecules, which combine to make hidden planets, animals, stars, and possibly even people. It's out there, for sure, but according to the theory, so is at least one, if not countless, parallel universes.
Next up, we have a very strange story about a couple whose neighbor had just recently died, but then they saw him just a couple months after reading his obituary. Did they jump into a parallel universe? You be the judge. The story comes to us from Reddit user YT Bay. The Redditor and his wife worked in the same building, so they often walked to work together. One morning they left the house, they passed by the doctor's office because his wife had an appointment. She stopped there and he continued on to work. Nothing unusual. Now on his route, the user noticed a familiar face in the distance. It was an old Italian man who used to sit outside his apartment, greeting neighborhood commuters. But the eerie part was, the man had died a couple months before. The Redditor crossed the street, convincing himself that it was just a lookalike. He saw the man, he knew he was dead, but dismissed it as maybe a mistaken identity. He thought nothing more of it and continued to work. Now at work, his wife called, sounding concerned. She said, "I think I'm hallucinating." She explained she had seen their dead neighbor, sitting in his usual spot just like the husband had seen. The Redditor found this strange since he'd been reading about switching dimensions. He didn't tell his wife about it because it seemed too out there, but she suggested they might have switched dimensions. Something she would normally never say. So you're probably thinking, sure, the man they saw may have been a look-alike, but here's where it gets even stranger. They'd gone to the neighbor's funeral, seen social media posts mourning his death, but now they couldn't find any trace of him having died.
Next up, kind of going off of James's point, while it's not entirely scientific, it is incredibly interesting. It is the Mandela effect, but I am not just talking about the whole Berenstain Bears debate, or even whether or not Curious George had a tail, or if it was ever in the city rather than and the city, or if it's spelt Febreze or Febreze. It's spelt Febreze, by the way. Or Skechers or Skechers, or if the Monopoly man had a monocle or no monocle, if the Fruit of the Loom logo ever had a cornucopia, if it's called Cheez-Its or Cheez-It, or even if the fact that chartreuse is actually a shade of green, not magenta as we all remember being taught in our past. I'm talking about these Mandela effects that might have very well changed your life as you know it, like you incorrectly remembering a dead neighbor, or the results of an election and the events that played out after the fact, or recalling different laws or policies that you can distinctly remember being enacted but that in reality never existed. If you've ever experienced anything like this on a personal level and none of your friends or family can remember the events in question, you might just be in the wrong universe, but don't worry, we're happy to have you.
This next story also comes to us from Reddit, from a user Living4You95, who talks about her glasses mysteriously changing color. So in 2018, the Reddit user bought blue framed glasses from Walmart. She had blue Vans, a blue purse, tried to get as much blue stuff as possible, including the blue glasses. After having a baby a couple years after, she started feeling the blue glasses were a bit childish. She stopped taking selfies in them, but still wore them every day. Now, one day while driving home, the Redditor looked in the rearview mirror and was shocked to see her glasses were now black on the front, with only the sides being blue. She thought, like, what the heck, did my husband prank me on April 1st and I just hadn't noticed? So she texted her husband, who assured her that he wasn't pranking her. She texted her mom asking what color her glasses were. Her mom said, "Blue. Why?" The Redditor then texted her mother-in-law, who also said they were blue, and her best friend from middle school confirmed, saying, "I know they were blue. We were together nearly every day for 2 years. They were blue." The Redditor insisted they never got new glasses. They even checked old pictures on Instagram, Facebook, and her phone, and now suddenly all the glasses in the pictures were black and blue. And it's odd that people wouldn't have noticed this, because that black is pretty predominant on there.
Next up, we have cosmic background radiation and how it might be hinting at not only a parallel universe, but one that may have very well bumped heads with our own. In a distant region of space towards the constellation of Eridanus, cosmic background radiation showed evidence of a large hole in space. Yes, a literal hole in space, completely void of all types of matter, including normal matter, which makes up gas and dust, stars, planets, and galaxies. This spot, it's completely empty, and it's incredibly massive, measuring 1 billion light years in diameter, making it one of the largest voids discovered to date. For comparison, the previous record-holding void was only somewhere between 250 and 330 million light years in diameter. Well, some scientists have begun theorizing that the newly discovered void, in correspondence with the other void located in the opposite hemisphere, could have been created by another universe bumping into our own, and either displacing or destroying a large chunk of matter within our universe, which is terrifying. Yeah, that's just...
Next up, we have an interesting theory involving math. Never thought I'd use the words math and interesting in the same sentence, but here we are. Maybe I've switched universes. The mathematical multiverse theory suggests different mathematical structures might represent separate universes. Since there are infinite mathematical possibilities, there could be infinite universes. So think of our universes being made entirely of math, a huge cosmic equation. Everything we see and experience, from tiny particles to massive galaxies, they can all be broken down using mathematics. So according to this theory, different mathematical structures create different universes, each with its own unique set of rules. Basically, if a mathematical structure can exist, so can a universe based on it, in theory.
Next up, we have quantum mechanics, which very existence suggests the possibility of endless parallel universes. For those of you who don't know, quantum mechanics is a branch of mechanics that provides a mathematical description for motion and interaction within subatomic particles. Concepts like quantization of energy, how much an electron can radiate or absorb, wave-particle duality, that anything can either be described as a wave or a particle, the uncertainty principle, the fact that we cannot know both the position and speed of photons and electrons with perfect accuracy, and the correspondence principle, the limit of large quantum numbers causing predictions of quantum physics to mirror classical physics, can all be used to hint towards a theory of many worlds multiverse, in which the universe splits into multiple branches anytime any decision is made, anywhere by anyone. Basically, any outcome of any event exists in its own separate universe. What's interesting about this is that it also might solve the time travel debate in relation to the bootstrap paradox as well as the grandfather paradox, which, if you've never heard of, we have a video on. And the reason why it solves this debate is because it states that if you go back and change something in the past, you haven't actually changed anything in your own universe, just simply gone and created a new one.
Alright, finally, we've covered countless unexplained disappearances on this channel from across time. Some are individuals who mysteriously vanish. Some are mass cases of vanishings, like on planes or ships. But what does this have to do with parallel universes? Well, of course, there are tons of possible explanations for people going missing. Flawless kidnappings, their bodies ending up in places that just don't get searched. Alien abductions, probably the most likely. But what about the possibility of them having crossed over to a parallel universe? It sounds pretty far-fetched, but I mean, who really knows? Maybe all these people saying they feel like they've crossed over into a different reality because things are different than they remembered really have crossed over into a different universe. And their friends and loved ones in their original universe are desperately searching for them to no avail. From the mysteries of the paranormal to time slips and quantum entanglement, these are unexplained phenomena that scientists blame on parallel universes. So let's start things off with ghosts. You probably didn't think I'd be starting off like this, but I think you could make a pretty good argument for paranormal stuff like this being a sign of possible parallel universe. Almost all of us have heard someone's first-hand account of having seen something, or feeling cold spots, hearing noises that don't seem to have a logical explanation. The usual explanation, aside from the ones made by skeptics, is that these are signs of hauntings, usually a dead person who's not able to fully cross over to the other side, so they remain in this limbo between the world of the living and the dead, tied to the places they once called home. But what if these so-called ghosts aren't actually spirits or souls, but glimpses into another universe? What if what we interpret as paranormal activity could be caused by parallel universes overlapping? Imagine it like looking through a frosted window. You can see movement on the other side, shadows and shapes, but they're not really there in the way we understand it. Maybe at times in certain places, the line between dimensions gets a little fuzzy, and you catch a brief glance into a parallel world. Instead of a ghost haunting you, maybe it's just a glimpse of someone from a different version of reality. Next, we've got time slips. Ever had a moment where you're sure you were somewhere, but everyone else insists you weren't, or vice versa? Now, if this happens to you a lot, definitely see a doctor before chalking it up to what some idiot online like me says, but if you've been cleared of any early signs of dementia, then maybe something stranger could be going on. Some people think these experiences could be linked to parallel universes, the idea being that we can sometimes slip between timelines. One minute you could be at a party, the next you're back home, but with no memory of how you got there. Or you might be walking down a street and suddenly the surroundings look completely different, like you've been dropped into a past version of your city. This sounds pretty ridiculous, and I can't say that I've ever experienced anything like this, but some people say they have. You can find stories like this all over places like Reddit. Not that you should believe everything you read online, but even if a small handful of these stories happen to be true, that is pretty strange. Some people think time slips could happen when two timelines briefly overlap, and your consciousness gets caught in this switch. You're still you, but somehow you're seeing a different version of events, like a time traveler who doesn't even know that they're time traveling. Now let's talk about something a bit more sciencey, quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that when something happens to one, the other is instantly affected, no matter how far apart they are. Yes, this really does happen, despite the fact that what I just described doesn't seem to follow the rules of space and time. It's as if the particles are somehow aware of each other across these vast distances. We still don't know exactly why this happens, and if you wanted to make the argument, which I am, it could possibly point to, at the very least, a glitch in the Matrix, similar to the parallel universes theory. A glitch in the Matrix meaning that the world around us is an illusion created by who knows what. Point is, our universe may just be one of many. Could we exist in this complex web of overlapping universes where every now and then one of the strands twitches in a way we don't understand, causing a mysterious and unexplainable phenomena like this? Alright, let's talk deja vu. Sure, this gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's pretty disconcerting. Every time it happens, it throws me off. I'm always left with this uneasy, existential dread for about 30 seconds before I get on with my day, but it's this brief reminder that despite everything science tells us, and as clear as the world seems at face value, there are a lot of things we just don't understand. It's eerie, but kind of humbling. How can we be experiencing a sequence of events so specific that we logically know that it's the first time we've lived it, and yet somehow there's this feeling in the pit of our stomach that, no, we've been here before, seen this play out. It's not a memory, more like something you've seen in a dream, maybe? It's vivid yet hazy at the same time. There are tons of theories on deja vu. One being that you have lived the exact moment, but in a different life. That time either runs in a constant loop, or a parallel universe running right along our own briefly overlaps and gives us that strange, uncanny feeling. Think of it like your brain momentarily accessing memories from a different version of yourself, one who's living a slightly different life, but maybe in this other version you did something exactly like what you're doing right now, and for a split second your brain glitches and pulls that memory into the current moment. You're living in the present moment, but your mind receives a kind of signal from a different timeline. So I mentioned glitches in the Matrix a bit earlier, so I want to go into more detail on that. This one is very popular online. Glitches in the Matrix are when people claim to experience weird moments where reality seems to glitch out. Like say you notice what looks to be the same person walking by twice in a row, or objects appearing or disappearing out of nowhere. Just weird stuff like that. Almost like a video game that's failing to render things correctly. The idea here is that we could be living in a simulation, and every so often, the code that runs the simulation gets a little wonky. But to take it a step further, what if those glitches aren't just errors in a simulation, but signs that our universe is brushing up against another one? In theory, if parallel universes do exist, we could occasionally get a peek into them or experience moments where the fabric of space-time bends. Could be as simple as noticing a repeating pattern in your day, but your brain can't quite reconcile with what you know of reality. It's like your system glitches out because it's trying to process something from another universe that doesn't quite match up with your version. The experience of missing time. This one is a classic, especially when it comes to UFOs. There are tons of stories and cases of people driving around a desolate road late at night when they see a strange light in the sky, and then all of a sudden, hours, or sometimes even days have passed that they just have no recollection of. Missing time. Could this phenomenon be connected to parallel universes? Well, the theory is that these abductees may have actually slipped into another timeline. As for whether aliens are involved or not, who knows? Point is, something could shift in the fabric of space-time and your consciousness jumps into a new version of reality, leaving this gap in your memories. It's not so much that time was stolen from you, it's more like you temporarily just moved into another timeline, and when you returned to your own, it felt like you lost those hours. Quantum tunneling is a very bizarre phenomenon where particles can move through barriers that should, according to physics, be impossible. Picture it like a ball traveling through a solid wall instead of bouncing off it. Yes, this does happen, but the science is very hard to explain. Again though, parallel universes, could they play into this? Could particles be tunneling from one reality to another? Instead of just interacting with the particles in our universe, these particles might slip through some sort of portal into another reality. This could help explain some of the bizarre stuff we see in our world that doesn't really make sense. Random moments where the laws of physics seem to just not apply. When it comes to parallel universes, the rules we know might not work the same way, and particles that can tunnel through different dimensions, well, that could be the key to how those universes are crossing paths, even if we don't always notice. Alright, let's switch gears, head up into space. We've got all kinds of mysterious things out there. Strange lights, unexplained radio signals, objects that don't behave how we expect them to. Of course, you know where I'm going with this one, but even some scientists wonder if some of these things could be evidence of parallel universes. Take the WOW signal, for example, an unexplained radio signal detected by astronomers back in 1977 that lasted for about 72 seconds and then disappeared. No one knows where it came from or what caused it. Some think it could have come from a parallel universe, trying to communicate with ours. And yes, it sounds pretty far-fetched, and maybe it is. Maybe there's a much more mundane explanation, but also consider just how vast and mysterious space is, and how little we really understand of it. Looking at it that way, the possibility of another universe interacting with ours in some way seems pretty plausible. Every so often we hear about things that seem to appear out of nowhere. Like maybe you're in your living room, you find a book on your coffee table that you're pretty sure you didn't buy, or maybe you swear you put your keys in one place but you find them sitting in a completely different spot and no one moved them. Or the reverse, objects just disappear without a trace. Can most situations like this be chalked up to our brains just sucking at remembering things sometimes? Sure, but could there also be something else going on in very rare cases? One theory is that this could be the result of objects slipping in and out of parallel universes. Say you leave your socks sitting on the edge of your bed, but when you turn around to grab them, they're nowhere to be found. So you look all over your room only to find that they're actually sitting on your bathroom counter. What if they were simply sucked into another version of reality for a while? Maybe it was in a parallel universe for a second, but when the reality shift happens, it comes back, just not in the same place you left them. Mandela effect. A phenomenon where a large group of people remember something in a certain way only to find out that it never actually happened that way at all. I think what's so interesting about this one is that unlike stuff like deja vu or objects going missing, situations that are a lot more likely to happen in isolation, Mandela effects are corroborated by mass amounts of people. For some context, the name Mandela effect comes from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. Some people think this is a glitch in our collective memory. Like we've all tapped into a parallel universe where things happen just slightly differently. The list of famous Mandela effects is huge and just continues to grow. From the famous Bernstein Bears versus Bernstein Bears confusion to the misremembered lines from famous movies like Star Wars and Forrest Gump, it's almost like there is a version of reality that some people are still hanging on to, still remembering, even though it never actually existed in our timeline. Again, are these just examples of our collective memory not being the most reliable, or could we just possibly be momentarily connecting to another universe where things unfolded just slightly differently? Our first story comes to us from Reddit user SadBlackCat666, who tells of the time they were introduced to their deceased great aunt. My maternal grandfather's sister passed away from cardiac issues in 2000. I was born in 2003 and was told for years growing up that this is your aunt, we'll just call her Laura here. She died from heart issues. I was able to understand the concept of death, dying from a very young age. So I understood that she passed away and that I would never meet her. Fast forward to 2014 or 15, I'm at a family function and my mom introduces me to my aunt. She explained to me, this is your Aunt Laura. I was shocked and told them both that I thought she died before I was born. She looked exactly like the woman in the pictures I was shown as a kid, so I knew it was her. They were both confused. After a bit of talking, I went back to hanging out with my cousins. However, the whole thing still spooked me for years to come. When I was 18, I asked my mom if she remembered this incident. She had no clue what I was talking about and still has no clue. She just doesn't remember a damn thing about what happened. I'm in my early 20s now and I'm still confused about the whole ordeal. I sometimes wonder if I slipped into a parallel universe where my great aunt was still alive in the mid-2010s. Striped Macaron posted about her incredibly harrowing near-death experience on Reddit. She'd been 25 years old at the time, driving home from work one night in Los Angeles on a curvy section of road on Sunset Boulevard. Suddenly a car spun out of control in front of her, blocking her lane with no time to halt. With another car beside her, options were limited. She instinctively swerved right then left to avoid collision. Then she felt a surreal flashback to a trip she'd taken with her mother to Disney World. She'd only remembered vague parts of the trip, but this particular memory wasn't one of them. This is when she was convinced her life was flashing before her eyes and that she was going to die. She screamed, "No, this isn't fair, not yet," as she swerved all over Sunset Boulevard. But then she just stopped and suddenly found herself alone on the road, as if everything had been wiped clean. She drove back home and didn't see a single car the entire way. Sunset Boulevard on a Saturday night was eerily deserted. She reached home and parked the car, still no one in sight. Once inside, she called a friend asking her to confirm that she really was alive, just to ground herself back into reality. She was convinced she might be in a limbo state after death. She finishes by saying, "There was no way mathematically to escape it. There was nowhere for the car on the right to go. This moment has haunted me my whole life. There have been times when I have questioned my own existence. I've wondered if my life since has been a very detailed death trip and I'm actually lying on Sunset Boulevard." The next story comes from Reddit user Cold Old Duck. I was picking up my mom and driving towards the same intersection I always went through. Lights were green. All of a sudden in my head, I felt and heard a split second of pure dread. Someone running the red and hitting me broadside right in the driver's side door. I could feel the crash, being crushed, the pain, the blackness, and it was instantly gone, just left with the dread and terror. I braked hard and slowed to an almost crawl stop at the intersection despite the green light, and a car came flying through the red at high speed a second or two later. Never knew why or how I knew, but it was terrifying. I felt like a cat who had escaped with one life less. Reddit user MaterialWolf8005 brings us this next story entitled, "I died and woke up in a parallel universe." I have sleep apnea. and sometimes if I sleep facing up, I will wake up gasping for air and choking on my saliva. Anyway, I was so tired I slept facing up. I remember waking up freaking out and gasping for air. As I looked to the ceiling, my vision started going black from all angles into a single point. Think of how an old TV turns off. After that, I was staring at myself through a mirror I have facing my bed. I remember thinking, oh no, I'm dead, as I looked at myself lying down. Then I saw myself moving as if I was waking up. I woke up. But the craziest part is that as soon as I woke up, I saw myself in the mirror staring at me, but standing up, not laying down. Now this world feels off. I was anxious and depressed, and all of a sudden, I'm fine. I feel like I died in a parallel universe and woke up in this one. It's so weird. I can't explain it, but I feel different. This next story is pretty trippy. It comes from Peyton Lay 0616, who seemed to have watched a monster truck completely vanish right in front of their house. They write, "This happened not too long ago. I was standing on my porch watching my kids play in the front yard. Our street has a crossroad intersection at the end, and I could see it from where I was. As I was watching my two kids, I noticed a big black truck, the kind that has floodlights at the top and bars in front of the grill, pulling up to the intersection from the left road. I saw a bald man driving and two other guys in the bed of the truck, and on the sides were two different flags. One looked like a French flag, I believe, and the other I had never seen before. They looked like they were celebrating, and I remember wondering if maybe their team had won a soccer game or something, because it looked like they were being loud. But the thing was absolutely silent, and I could see them whooping and hollering and chanting. Anyway, they turned down my street, coming towards me. I kept my eyes on them because they were intriguing me. I watched them turn down my street, start coming my way. Now, here's the tricky part. My neighbor had a big SUV in their driveway that blocked off my vision from part of the road, and once that truck, those two flags, and three celebrating men reached the part of the road obstructed by my view of the SUV, they never came back out. I even walked down into my yard to see if maybe they'd pulled into the grass of another neighboring house, but nothing. They just vanished behind the neighbor's car. Always awkward running into someone who recognizes you and you just can't remember their name, or worse, can't remember them at all. This story from Open Temperature 6440 kind of takes that to a different level. It goes as follows. This happened back in 2014. I went to Walgreens a few blocks from my house at night to buy a few items. While I was there, this guy down the aisle from me started talking to me like he knew me, but I didn't know him. Never seen him before in my life. He asked me how things are going and asked if I was still working for Joe. Joe was the name of my boss that I worked for a while when I was in college. I told him no, I wasn't still working for Joe because I'd graduated and gotten a full-time job. I was so confused and asked how he knew me. He seemed surprised that I didn't remember him and said that he was Joe's son, which is weird because the Joe I worked for didn't have a son, just two daughters. He could tell I was confused and asked if I was okay, and I replied that I was fine, but I didn't remember him. He was still shocked that I didn't know him. Eventually, the conversation ended, and I went on my way. A few months later, I ran into my old boss, Joe, and I told him I ran into someone that said he was his son, and asked just to make sure he didn't have a son. He said, nope. Not that I know of. I still don't know what to make of that encounter, but it was bizarre to say the least. My theory is that I somehow entered an alternate universe or reality, but I don't know. Maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Who knows? The following is a story from DSLY4425, who writes about a possible glitch in the Matrix. I remember writing a term paper in college about a specific disease and disease process that still exists to this day, and the treatment at the time, specifically that at the time there was no medication available on the market to treat it, although there was a lot of research being done. Fast forward 15 years, and I was debating with my pharmacist, who was also my boss, how long a medication for said disease was on the market, and we got curious and looked it up. In this dimension, the medication has been on market since the late 90s, which would have been high school for me. I definitely wouldn't have written my paper on the subject, or gotten a high score on it for that matter, if the medication really was on the market in the late 90s, as the paper was written in 2003 at the earliest. And I wrote the paper on that specific disease and process as I was working with patients directly impacted by it at the time, and had taken a good deal of extra training in my field of work specifically with those patients, so I kinda knew my stuff and where research was heading, which at the time was developing the drugs that are now on the market, but none were out. Following story comes to us from Wolfie is Back in Black, who was in high school when this happened, living in the same neighborhood she lives in now in Mumbai. The area hadn't undergone much development back then, with dense vegetation covering what is now occupied by buildings. The Redditor was very familiar with the area, having spent her teenage years exploring its nooks and crannies with her then boyfriend. One day, they were lost in conversation and wandered towards the end of the road. Without paying attention, they turned right and accidentally walked into the last building on the lane, and what they found was very strange. In total contrast to the well-maintained surroundings, this particular building was dilapidated, like it had been bombed and set on fire. It had an eerie silence about it, devoid of the usual signs of life. No birds, no insects, nothing. There was moss growing in places and chunks of concrete had fallen off. They had never seen the building before and hastily left, joking about the place looking like a haunted apartment. Well, 2 weeks later, she found herself in the same lane with her cousin, and lo and behold, that dystopian looking building had completely transformed. It was painted in vibrant colors, flowers bloomed in pots, and there was vegetation surrounding it that would have taken months to grow. She approached a guard who was stationed nearby and asked him if the building had been recently renovated, and he looked at her like she was crazy and just said, no. From Reddit user Star884, we have the blue truck. The story goes as follows. My mother and I were on our way to a funeral. We stopped by the corner gas station to grab drinks on the way. I was in the passenger seat, my mom was driving. She turns around, not moving, but the car is in gear, to where I thought she was backing out of the spot. I always look in the mirrors when anyone is reversing, just a natural habit. So thinking she's backing out, I was like, whoa, wait, there's someone coming. I saw a pretty big light blue truck coming very fast behind us. My mom says, cool, I see it, and stops. All of a sudden, there is another car coming pretty fast on the complete opposite side. The freaking blue truck disappeared though, just gone. It had nowhere to go. We were all literally about to crash all three cars. Somehow, it was gone. So my mom and I both saw the big light blue truck coming. We either had something happen or we had a shared delusion. And finally, we have a strange story from Reddit user London Mama 2019 who had a very strange experience in a graveyard. Probably the last place you'd want to have a strange experience in. I had taken my 6-year-old for a walk to the playground. We just moved houses, so didn't know the area well. So I checked my Apple Maps to see if there was a quicker way home, as my little one was starting to complain a bit. The quickest way was through a graveyard. We started walking and the birds were singing. It was quite sunny, perfectly normal. As we walked further though, the atmosphere just changed. It's really hard to explain, but it felt completely flat. No birds, no people, just a really oppressive feeling. We also noticed that some things looked not quite right, like gravestones facing in different directions. I'd never seen this before and it was bizarre. Some were in rows, some sideways, some facing the opposite direction, and there was a huge pile of dirt against the side of the little church. I didn't want to scare my daughter, so kept chatting. Then she seemed to notice it too and said, "This is horrible, I don't like it here." I checked my map and it had gone crazy. It was directing us the opposite way and kept changing and moving around. I followed the path round, and as the main street came into view, everything seemed to go back to normal. Birds, people, traffic sounds, even the sun seemed to get brighter. When we got home, we talked about it. I told my husband, my daughter called it the creepy graveyard. The following week we went back to show my husband, but it was like a different place, no weird vibes at all. It was very peaceful but completely normal, and we couldn't find the gravestones facing different ways. I read a book last week about time slips, and the way it felt was described by a few people who had experienced time slips. So now I'm wondering, if this could be what happened to us.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Katie rocks. You ever hop in the shower first thing in the morning and it feels like literal paradise? Otherworldly, some would say. Well, a new TikTok trend has me meditating in the shower now, apparently. Here we go. TikTok users left, right, and center are stepping forward, or rather backwards, with their claims on entering parallel universes. Nashville model Katie Rocks recently kicked this off, and she used the social media platform to recall a 2017 trip to Paris that some of her classmates claimed missed the flight, although Katie saw them with her own eyes. I remember walking on that aircraft past two of my friends and sitting like 3 rows behind them. Then the 4 of us took a taxi back to the apartments we were staying in while we were in school, and I distinctly remember this. 2 days later, they're talking about how they weren't 3 rows in front of us, and to this day I have no idea why they remember missing the flight. That's way too close to the plot of Final Destination. Honestly, this creeps me out just reading about it. I can't even begin to unravel this one, no way. The same user, Katie Rocks, posted again a month later, this time saying she's since discovered the ability to shift realities. Showers. Hot showers are the key, apparently. I would have guessed baths, but showers are cool too. We'll take those. Number 9, a familiar face. Username High Life No Miller Lite posted this one a couple months back on Reddit. Great name, also gotta say that's a really good name. It's since got a lot of attention. Let me know what you think. They say I'm from a very dry, hot state in the U.S. and I was visiting California on a trip with my wife. While out eating, we both witnessed a person that looked exactly like me. Same typical mid-fade and head dents inherited from my father. Same body type, only chubby rather than my more slim and athletic frame. I saw the side profile from the back as they walked away from view, and it was my exact face. That's so creepy. My wife had a direct view but could not remember directly what my face looked like. But she noted similarities from my body to head and even the way that I walked. I couldn't believe what we saw. Any thoughts? Question mark. I mean, if you didn't mention the head dents and got that specific, this wouldn't have stuck with me like it did. I also love the subtle roast on the other you. You're like, yeah, this guy was just like me, only, you know, not ripped. Otherwise, that's quite creepy. Thanks for sharing. Number 8, quantum leap. So yeah, I went down that rabbit hole I talked about and I discovered another TikTok. How fun. We love these. Awesome. This quantum leap was obtained by Marian Valenza. She took to the social media platform to implore others to take the leap. You know, no more manifestation Mondays. The key to these quantum leaps is a hot shower. Yeah, a hot shower. How convenient is that? Thank God it doesn't suck, you know? Thank God it's not a cold ice bath, or else no one would know. Valenza explains the first rule here. Number 1 is that you want to give yourself enough time because you don't want to rush this. Obviously, you want to do this with intentionality, she says. Yeah, sorry I'm late, boss. I don't want to rush my hot quantum shower. You know how it is. He's like, oh yeah, classic. Next step is to literally visualize the water cleansing you so that it removes all your limiting beliefs, the negative thoughts that you have, all the things holding you back from stepping into your higher self. Visualize not currently being late for work. And then there you go, you're set. I'm gonna try this tomorrow morning. I'm just gonna have a hot quantum shower and arrive at 10:15. Number 7, Sleep Street. This one comes from username Oopsies. It's like oopsies, but with a bit more Reoccurring dreams have never been so haunting. Forgot it's a dark list. Here we go. Ever since I was a teenager, I've dreamed about an alternate life where I go to university and work in a city that I've never been in. It started around when I was 16 or 17 and now I'm 25. It's super detailed where I go on hikes, I hang out with friends, I bike through neighborhoods and do mundane everyday life things. The university is outside of a major city and I'm always exploring nature, beaches, islands, all that jazz. Last night I was feeling sick and in return had one of the most vivid dreams I've had in a long time. I met someone and developed a deep relationship that felt incredibly emotional and real. Luckily, I woke up right when I was trying to navigate Google Maps to drive to a park, so I remember the streets that we were on. The street was called Dutch Island Road. I never heard of it in real life, so I decided to look it up. The only thing that popped up was a rural area in Rhode Island. It wasn't exactly the same layout of the roads I remember on the map, but the nature and area looked eerily similar to what I saw while driving. I start looking around the area, clicking different locations, and I start to freak out on how everything looks just like in my dream. Mind you, I've never been to Rhode Island, but the weirdest part is that specific buildings in the Rhode Island University and Warwick area ones, those are the same ones that I saw in my dream all the time. I've always thought that my dreams are a glimpse of living an alternate universe, and I feel like this detail solidifies the potentiality of it being a reality. Thoughts? Too many big words. Those are my thoughts. Potentiality. I'm gonna start using that in the next list. You'll hear that from me in the future, for sure. Otherwise, so scary. Hope that goes away. Or doesn't? I don't know. Do you like it? I wouldn't like that. If I dreamt about about an alternate life. I'm like, yeah, I actually have 2 jobs. It's exhausting. I never sleep. Number 6, good times, dad times. Coming from Reddit user Apprehensive Humor 55, they say, when I was young, from the ages of around 3 to 10, I was truly convinced I'd already lived a full life. I remember being around 40 years old with a wife and 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and then one day I just woke up as a child and my past was all just a big blur with random memories that would come to me here or there. I'm smiling because this is funny, but like it's so scary. This is my biggest fear, I think, in life. It made no sense. My parents said that I used to tell stories about when I was a dad, and they would just laugh it off and be like, oh, that's your imagination, obviously. But deep down, I genuinely did have these strange memories of a past life. For instance, when I was 4 years old, my family went to Disney World, and the whole car ride down, I was telling stories about when I was a dad and I went to Disney World. Just a kid in the back seat with milk, like, oh yeah, these roads. Still haven't fixed them. The weirdest thing is that when we got to Disney World, I knew that I'd already been there before. I knew where everything in the park was and was essentially showing my family everything. At that time, my family just thought it was weird that I knew where everything was, but at the time in my head, it all made sense. To me, I just knew where all the rides were because of when I was a dad. After a while, I stopped telling these stories of when I was a dad because my siblings would always make fun of me for it. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing, this is my worst, I'm laughing at you a little bit, this is crazy. Eventually, I just started going on with my life and haven't thought about much of it since, although I wish I did because the memories back then were much more vivid and real than how they are now. He's gonna be so confusing 30 years to his kids. He's like, when I was a dad for the first time, Disney was way less busy. Kids are like, first time? What other family? What are you talking about? Why is mom crying? That's so scary. I buy into this. I don't know, the afterlife, maybe that past dad died and then you were reborn? I don't know, that's scary. I don't want to think of it. Number 5, spirit animal. Do you believe in spirit animals? I kind of do. I want to, at least. Ever since I watched Harry Potter, I always wanted a Patronus. Mine would be a frog for sure. It'd be like a little lanky frog. Wouldn't be cool at all. This next one makes me want to believe. Coming from user Less Cold, they say, about 30 years ago, I was a young college student heading back to college after break in an overnight bus. I was about 19, didn't drink or anything, had no history of mental illness, and was reading a book when seamlessly, I wasn't in the bus anymore. I was now swimming around a rock formation which I knew was part of my hunting territory and was chasing a fish, which I then caught in my mouth and could feel the bones crushing between my teeth and it wriggling against my whiskers. That's how they posted it, no in between. They're just like, yeah, I was reading a book and all of a sudden, I'm a fish. I was totally at ease. I was fast and agile and I could feel the drag of the water, like, you know, the pull of the current, question mark. I like how they included that, mansplaining the current of the water. They're like, I being a fish know this, but do you know about this? I'm like, yeah, we know about currents, man. I'll continue. As I moved effortlessly through it, I knew my body and where I was going and what I was doing, and there was no alarm whatsoever that anything was amiss. You know, I didn't realize that I was really a 19-year-old on a bus. The whole experience couldn't have lasted longer than 30 seconds or so, and then just as seamlessly as I once was there, I was then again back on the bus. I remember sitting there for a second, staring at the page of my book before, you know, having a WTF just happened reaction kicked in, and then I had a bit of a mental freak out. Then a few years later, I saw a documentary about sea otters, and I knew then that that's what I had been for that brief moment in time. I knew it's impossible, but it happened to me, and surely I can't be the only one. I don't know, man. I've never been a sea otter before. Chris, have you been a sea otter? You don't think so? You don't think? You never know. Never say never, though. Has anybody ever heard of something like this, or has it happened to you? Have you been reading a book, and then all of a sudden you're a sea otter eating a fish with whiskers? If so, sound off down below. Sea otters are just smacking the keyboard. They're like, help me switch back. Number 4, switching universes. Coming from Mulks23, this one is so specific that it may very well just be real. Honestly, I'm a little convinced. I've been wanting to share this for some time now. A few months ago, one morning, I believe when I woke up, I did so to a different universe. Similar to ours, but different in some aspects. Before I went to sleep the night before, I kept my Surface tablet on my nightstand, and it was absolutely fine. The next day when I opened it though, I could see a large crack across the top. There's nothing, repeat nothing, that could have caused the crack. I was disappointed, of course, the tablet's new, but I didn't think much of it. However, over the course of the following days, I noticed some things/events are significantly different than how I remember them to be. An actress that I know was married to a gangster, is happily now married to a businessman. A different actress married said gangster, a name that I would have definitely known. I'm from India and I settled in US, and this is a Bollywood actress in question. A series that was being released on Amazon Prime is now on Netflix, question mark. Yeah, that happens all the time. I'm still asking those questions myself. I'm watching Harry Potter on like 3 different platforms, like what's going on? The movie Morbius, I've seen this movie. I thought they must have remade this or something, but nope, it was a new movie. A few other things as well, but those I can attribute to misplaced memories. Not the above though. Also, I definitely did not hit my head or anything which could have caused me to remember things differently. I mean, after all of that, I gotta ask, how is Morbius? It doesn't look that bad, honestly. Hope Spider-Man's in it. Thanks for sharing, Mulks23. Hopefully you're in the right universe. Number 3, cosmic commute. This one has me stumped, folks, I'm not gonna lie. Username IcyFlame2U says, in January, I left my friend's home at almost midnight. I live not even 10 minutes north of her. I remember getting in my car and then boom, I'm pulled over by the police. It's 2:10 a.m. now, and I'm 1 hour north of her, close to crossing state lines. In a city I have never been to, I don't even know how to get out there and what freeways I took, as we are not really close to any freeways. How did I get there, and what happened to a whole extra hour? When I returned home, I was having such anxiety from it all that I was throwing up and everything. We just don't understand what happened. The comments were supportive here. Some suggest to look into epilepsy, but the OP responded right after saying that they did, and luckily that wasn't the case. So, what do you guys think it is? Comment down below. I think definitely a time leap. That's pretty crazy. Number 2, dog treats and universe leaps. Anything involving dogs, I buy into it. I mean, who would lie about dogs for attention, right? Only psychos, I guess. Username mememan42069 says, when I was getting ready to go to my brother's house, I packed some stuff for my dog since he was coming. I put my dog's toys, leash, 2 dog shirts, and treats. I packed them all up, and when I got to my brother's house, I was looking for my dog's treats, and my dog's treats were not there. I vividly remember putting my dog's treats in a bag, and the weird thing was, when I got home, his treats were in the exact spots that I picked it up from, and it didn't fall out of the bag, and somebody didn't put it back because I live alone. So I was thinking maybe I slipped into a parallel universe where I didn't pack my dog treats. I've been weirded out by it for the past year, and I've been trying to come up with a better reason. I mean, that sounds alarming, 100%, but panicking about anything that involves dog treats, it's just hilarious to me. Sorry. Yeah, I hope you figure out your problem, but more importantly, I hope your dog doesn't get stiffed on treats again. And finally, number 1, 2016 again. This one caught my attention, caught it real bad. Posted 5 days ago by user Silence v Silence. They say the universe is currently shifting, and it has been the past few days. The last time a change took place like this was November 2016-ish. Some of you already know this. I'm sure you felt it in the air over the past week like I have. It feels positive. I hope it is. First comment has tons of upvotes here, and it says, your ears ringing real bad too? Question mark. This is insane because my ears have been ringing a lot in the past month. I mentioned it to Olivia, swear to God. Are your ears ringing? I don't know. What universe are we in? Do we want a part 2 of this list? Hit that thumbs up if so.
Number
9, we have the Beatles ain't dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed, and there was a man named Jonah sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonah started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions, they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8, we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam, and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say, this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they've succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7, we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady, and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia, this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off, and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. Never mess with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this, she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job, and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6, we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5, we have interdimensional cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4, we have what road is this? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alaca de Guadarira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alaca de Guadarira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3, we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out in what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2, we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot, we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light, but because of this bending of light, there is a chance that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension.
G'day Top 10 fam, we are back again with one of your favorite mind-melting videos. We brought you part 1 and part 2, and now welcome back to part 3 of our list of top 10 real humans that might be from a parallel universe. From conspiracy theories we know and love to those perhaps unfamiliar to you, we cover all this and more in today's video. I'm your host Rachel Fisher, and let's get cracking. Number 10. The Babushka Lady. The year 1963 might send your history teacher into a spiral about all things that happened in that year. On the top of that list was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The bullet that shook the nation. With multiple eyewitnesses yet no initial clues to who the shooter was, even though the case pretty much settled on Lee Harvey Oswald, there are still a ton of conspiracy theories surrounding his death. One of which surrounds a mysterious lady named the Babushka Lady, an unknown elderly woman who may have photographed the events. It is clear that she took multiple photos of the assassination, but none of her photos ever showed up. Despite multiple searches for the woman, she never showed up. To add more fuel to the fire, could it have been that she was a simple interdimensional traveler sent to document an alternate reality? Who knows? I mean, maybe. There's a reason there's a might in the title, so. Number 9. Alexandria Alexis. You may have seen the side profile of a mysterious woman named Alexandria Alexis circulate social media a little while ago, around 2013. Then, if you were following the story, you may have heard that it was debunked. Or was it? For those of you who are unfamiliar, Alexandria Alexis was a mysterious actress who suddenly graced New York society in the year 1898. She took the stage by storm. Some adored her, others abhorred her, saying that the woman was likely insane. She kept saying she was from the future after all, specifically 2025. But in 1899 on New Year's Eve, she simply disappeared, never to be seen again. So, who was she really? Well, it is said that she wasn't a time traveler at all, but a British actress who appeared in New York named Grace Rawlinson. But if you look at the two pictures, they kind of look a little similar, but not too much. So was the mystery really debunked, or is there another weirder explanation that they don't want us to know? Number 8. D.B. Cooper. Okay, hate me if you want. I debated putting D.B. Cooper on this list, but here we are. It's part 3, okay? How does a man who no one knows steal a bunch of money, leap out of a plane, and entirely disappear? Unless you're some mysterious, mischievous Norse god. Tom Hiddleston, what's up? Love you. Anyways, the year 1971, an afternoon on November 24th in Portland, Oregon, armed with sunglasses and a will to pull off a mystery, the so-named Dan Cooper sidled onto flight number 305 bound for Seattle, Washington, bourbon and soda in hand. He made some cheeky eyes at the flight attendant. She blushed. Was he the one? I'm editorializing, but you're still watching, so sue me. He asked her to sit and slides her a note. Was it his number? Nope. It simply said that he had a bomb, not that he was da bomb, or she was da bomb. A rerouted plane, 4 parachutes, and $200,000 in $20 bills later, and Dan Cooper leapt out of the plane before he could break any more hearts, never to be seen again. It's one thing to disappear without a trace. He could have fallen into the ocean, but who was he in the first place? Cooper was a man without a past, in this universe at least, but who knows about the next. Number 7. Wolf Messing. The man who knew too much. A man so mysterious and enigmatic, he even had minds like Einstein and Freud stumped. Wolf Messing had to be from another world, or perhaps he was simply a man who lived between them. Wolf Messing is most famous for a psychic prediction he made in World War II against Adolf Evil Man. In 1937, Messing said, and I quote, and I get to say his name right now, so sorry YouTube, "If declares war in the East, his death awaits him," unquote. He was specifically referring to an attack on Russia, which funnily enough, eventually came true. This prediction angered the German leader so much that he sent out a bounty of 20,000 Reichsmarks on his head. He was eventually arrested, but escaped after hypnotizing the guards that there were diamonds all over the floor. Damn, Messing. What a mess. But that's not all. Freud put him to the test himself in Einstein's own apartment. He gave Messing a mental command, then left the room. Messing was successful and did exactly as instructed. He left the room, grabbed a pair of tweezers, and pulled a hair from Einstein's mustache.
all without Freud uttering a single word. Messing didn't disappear, but actually died in 1974. Whether or not he could physically travel between worlds, it does appear that Messing's talents were not of this one. Number 6. The Lost Colony of Roanoke. We've talked about individuals appearing and reappearing, but what about a whole group of people just... The Lost Colony of Roanoke is one of the most famous disappearances in history. Great Britain tried to colonize this island a few times, initially attempted by Sir Walter Raleigh. They were already having trouble with a lack of supplies, as well as they didn't have a good relationship with the surrounding indigenous tribes. Gee, I wonder why. Anyways, they went back to get more supplies, and when mission leader John White returned, there was not a soul there. The fort was fortified, but not a single person remained. The only clue left behind was a cryptic word that said Croatoan, an island they thought the colony had retreated to, but they were still never found. Did some kind of mal-event befall them, or did they accidentally find an entirely new world to explore? Only they know the answers. Number 5. Sir Victor Goddard. The year was 1935 when a winged commander named Sir Victor Goddard, what a great name, right? Took a flight he will never forget. The man was to fly his open cockpit biplane from Scotland to England, but he may have flown somewhere else by accident. He was passing over the World War I constructed Drem airfield in Edinburgh that was a bit of a fixer-upper. That was how he left it, but when he returned home 24 hours later, he flew into an unusual storm, causing him to lose control of his airplane. Miraculously, he recovered from a downward spiral just mere feet above a stony beach, but when he rose back up into the sky, the once stormy display was now overwhelmed by sunshine. And when he came across the airfield he'd seen when he left, it was entirely restored. There were planes he didn't recognize, along with men in blue jumpsuits, which was weird, as the engineers typically wore brown. Not even Goddard himself ever unraveled the mystery, but one thing is for sure, Goddard took a detour that wasn't on the flight plan. The Philadelphia Survivor. Ah yes, the Philadelphia experiment. I bet you wondered when this little experiment was gonna make it onto this list, you cheeky monkey. Urban legend, conspiracy theory, the Philadelphia experiment remains a thrilling possibility. In 1943, the USS Eldridge allegedly was made invisible and teleported from Pennsylvania to Virginia. Did this actually happen? Who knows? But the movie definitely did, and it did nothing to help the conspiracy theories circling the world. But a man named Alfred Bielek found the film incredibly life-changing, as while watching it, he realized who he actually was, the lone survivor of the experiment. After seeing the 1988 film, Bielek's memories came flooding back, that he was actually Ed Cameron and he had been born in 1916. He'd been recruited by a secret mission called the Project Rainbow in 1940. He said Black Ops sent him through a portal in the Pentagon to Alpha Centauri. While there, aliens interrogated him and transformed him into his Al Bielek self at only 1 year old. That's one way to reverse the aging process, I guess. And a lot of people don't believe him. You can guess why. It sounds pretty crazy, but you know, it's a crazy world. Who knows? Number 1, last but not least, the story of Ron and Chuck Quinn. Whilst on the hunt for ancient gold in Arizona, Ron and Chuck Quinn may have stumbled upon something even older and far more mysterious. In 1956, the brotherly duo were 3 weeks into their adventure when they saw 2 strange large balls of blue-green light. Sounds like an alien encounter. Well, perhaps, though things get even stranger. They discovered that the lights were a reoccurring phenomenon in the area, and the brothers saw them several more times. Later on in their travels, they passed a stone archway that looked odd among the landscape. They discussed it with a local native named John, who warned that anyone who passed through it never returned. See where I'm going with this? They even threw rocks and stuff and nothing came back. It was nicknamed the doorway to the gods, for on top of the disappearances, some reported seeing shimmering figures through the doorway. When the brothers returned to it, at first nothing strange happened. They threw stuff through it, dropped dead on the other side, not a big deal, until one day, the door started shimmering. The men vowed never to return, except 4 years later Chuck couldn't help himself, so he ventured back and sought out the archway. When he got there, he saw the archway and also a canyon that he didn't remember being there, but when he went to return on his way back, he suddenly realized, Out of nowhere, he had just traveled 250 yards away from where he was when he began his descent back, having no recollection of traveling that far. Did Chuck enter the doorway and something erased his memory? I suppose we will never know. Number 10, Caspar Hauser. I actually think someone mentioned this name last time in the comments or in another video, so whoever you are, thank you. I just couldn't find the comment again. Caspar Hauser appeared out of nowhere, and wherever his name appears, rumors encircle it. Some say he was even the infamous Man in the Iron Mask. He was first discovered limping through the streets of Germany in the 1800s and would accept no food but black bread and water. He was carrying an envelope addressed to the cavalry captain in Nuremberg and could barely speak. The locals eventually taught him German in order to discern where he was from, but when he could finally speak enough of the language, they discovered he didn't know where he was from or who his parents were, only that he grew up in a cell too short for him, hence the limp. Very Iron Masky. The royal courts took an interest in him and he became a sort of beloved enigma, except by those who tried to assassinate him. Adding to the mystery, the man evaded countless attacks until he was finally killed by a stabbing in 1838. No one knew the motives or who the killer was. Only a note left in mirror writing said, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am. To save Hauser the effort, I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border on the river. I will even tell you the name MLA. Where did this man come from, and if it was where we think he came from, were there others? Others who wanted him dead. His tombstone reads, "Here lies Caspar Hauser, riddle of his time." Number 9, Jill Perez. I'm actually kind of jealous of this one. If I could have any superpower in the world, it would be teleportation, hands down. I think about this a lot actually. Want pizza for lunch? Boom! Italy. Need a little vacay beach time? Boom, baby! Jill Perez may have unlocked the secret to teleportation hundreds of years ago in the 1590s. The key is you have to be really, really tired. It's a wonder that this hasn't already happened to me. Jill Perez was acting as a sentry for the Governor General of the Philippines, which requires a lot of standing and waiting. While he was on duty, not doing a very good job evidently, he heard the general had been assassinated, and due to the long hours, he started to feel faint at the news and took a moment to brace himself and closed his eyes while leaning against the wall. When he opened his eyes, he was surrounded by soldiers in uniforms unlike his own, and after they arrested him, he realized he was in Mexico? He told them what had happened to his general, and when they discovered he was telling the truth, they sent him back via ship. Just how he got to Mexico is a mystery, but I will consider carrying my passport with me at all times, just in case this ever happens to me. Please? Come on, I want some ramen. Number 8, the man from Lisbea. I mentioned the man from Torrid last time, well here is the man from Lisbea. If you just arrived from a parallel universe, I bet you'd be a little confused as to what's going on. Parisian police found a man wandering around the city in 1905 that they decided to interrogate because they didn't know what the heck he was doing. He didn't speak the language, and when they asked where he was from, he said Lisbea. Sounds a lot like Lisboa or Lisbon, right? So they called in a translator from Portugal, but the man didn't speak Portuguese. In fact, he didn't speak any language they recognized, though it did follow the same patterns as most languages do. Eventually, the police had spent enough time with him and arrived at enough dead ends to decide to let the man go, but were committed to keeping an eye on him because they weren't getting safe vibes. They let him off with a warning, but almost as soon as they let him go, they never heard or saw him again. So where did he go? Into a parallel universe, traveling through space and time. Whoa! Anyways. Number 7, Jerome of Sandy Cove. This is actually a pretty famous supernatural story here in Canada. The tale of Jerome of Sandy Cove. Like some others on this list, the event occurred in the 1800s in 1863. A boy had been walking on the beach and encountered an old man who appeared to be suffering. Very Great Expectations-y. The man couldn't speak English and only mumbled to the boy even after he was picked up and examined by authorities. His legs had been severed professionally at the knee, but no one knew how he got there, and it hadn't been done by anyone close by. They continued to try and communicate with him, and a woman named Jean-Nicolas, who was multilingual, tried to speak Latin, French, Italian, and Spanish, but there wasn't a glimmer from the man. The only thing they could barely make out was when the man mumbled something like Jerome. The man became a mystery and a local oddity all the way up until he passed away in 1912. There is even a real gravesite you can visit. How did a man with no legs and barely a name and no one to claim him end up on a beach alone? There's only one explanation, or several, depending how wild you want to get with it. You do you. Number 6. Utsorobun. This one could have a relationship to alien technology or interdimensional travel. There's a reason there's a might. You decide and I'll let the story speak for itself, shall we? The setting, 19th century Japan in a small village. According to scrolls recording the incident, a strange ship shaped like a rice bowl washed ashore. It had glowing lights inside and looked nothing like anything anyone had ever seen. Sounds like an alien ship crashed, right? That's what I thought. Well, it could be, but upon the description inside, it may sound a little too familiar to be from beyond our world. When villagers peered inside the ship, they saw food that looked similar to candy, as well as a kind of plush carpeting, very 60s or 90s depending. Then, when the ship opened, an alleged 18-year-old red-headed woman with white hair extensions clutched a strange box emerged. She didn't speak their language and no one could figure out where she came from. Something about this story sounds too familiar, especially with the hair extensions, and it makes me wonder, could this be a ship from the future or another future that somehow landed here? With no way of knowing, I guess we might as well have fun with the answer. Go for it! Let us know in the comments. Number 5. Ettore Majorana. Ageless, elusive, and remarkably intelligent. Just 3 ways to describe Ettore Majorana. A man who disappeared, then reappeared, leaving questions in his wake every single time. Majorana was a scientist born in 1906 that made major headlines, not only due to his discoveries, but because of his disappearances. Being plural. He was pronounced dead at age 32 after he allegedly tried to flee fascist Italy to take up residency in Buenos Aires. A plot revealed by a lone witness who said he met him twice before he disappeared. The witness stated that both times they met, Majorana revealed different scientific discoveries he made, but when the man vanished, they assumed he died. That is until a strange photo turned up decades later. In it was clearly Ettore Majorana taken 20 years after he died, posing with another man and did not appear to have aged a single day. The photo was then reevaluated in 2011 and it was confirmed that the man in it was in fact Majorana. My question is, what was he researching and what did he learn? Is this a question of time travel or was Majorana able to figure out the impossible, interdimensional travel? Wherever he is, who knows if we will ever see him again. Number 4. David Lang. Okay, this one is definitely a case of interdimensional travel if I've ever heard one. Kind of. I just hope he's okay. In the 1880s, I feel like the 1800s was a weird time, because this is a very common, century for weird things to happen. Anyways, in the 1880s, David Lang, a simple farmer with an overall happy life, was expecting the arrival of his friend August Peck. On the day of his visit, he was expecting to see David greet him with open arms, but instead, a shrill scream cut through the air. As Peck approached the house, he saw, or rather didn't see, his friend slowly fade away into the air while he was walking towards them. But wait, it gets stranger. Peck reported seeing a strange circle form after Lang's figure had disintegrated, and that nothing ever grew in that area ever again. Lang's daughter didn't witness the event but had heard her father call out to her while she was collecting firewood on the other side of the house. This sounds like something out of the TV show Fringe, if anybody ever watched that. For whatever reason, something cracked in the world that day, swallowing up a simple farmer, bringing him to a world we probably will never know, unless what happened to David Lang happens to you. Before we hit our top 3, do us a favor and smash that like button, and as always remember to subscribe because it's nice and we like it. Number 3, Diderici's disappearance. There have definitely been a few epic prison escapes in the past through various methods, the old digging a hole with a spoon, bribing a few guards, planning an outside job. But Diderici managed to disappear into thin air. In 1815, Diderici was serving time in a Prussian prison for impersonating and extorting his dead employer. The prison was infamously heavily guarded and housed some of the most cunning prisoners in Europe, but no one has any explanation for how he escaped. On his way to the exercise yard, suddenly Diderici's shackles were empty. The man had disappeared into plain sight and left guards aghast as the shackles once around his wrists clattered to the floor. After several investigations, they finally ruled his disappearance as an act of God, or a crack in the space-time swallowed him up. I think both are equally likely. What do you think? Number 2, The Runner. This is the tale of James Warson, a man who loved to run, though some would say a little too much. He was a British shoemaker in the 1830s, see 1800s again, right? With a passion for running that made him famous in his town. Not only was he fast, but he had incredible stamina, qualities that led to a bet made with his friends that said he couldn't run on a 16-mile well-known trail without stopping. Warson was a betting man, so of course he took on the challenge with relish. It became a whole event. His friends brought a horse and carriage with them to travel with him to watch, but a few miles into the race, he vanished in front of their very eyes. Warson tripped and let out a piercing scream, but not due to pain. His friends reported seeing a look of terror on his face, unlike anything they'd ever seen, as if he saw something right in front of him that scared him to his core. Seconds later, he vanished into thin air. They searched the area extensively, got the police involved, but nothing. No trace was ever found of him ever again. That secret remains with Warson, wherever, whenever he is. And last but not least, we have our number 1 spot, Stephen Kubacki. Disappearances are never simple, but this one continues to boggle the minds of even the man who disappeared himself. In 1978, Stephen Kubacki was excited to take on the skiing trails near Lake Michigan, but when he still hadn't returned the following day, the search began. They searched for days, but the only traces they found led to one dead end after the other. The first discovery was a set of footprints where Kubacki said he was going, but they stopped right at the edge of a frozen lake, with no signs of further footprints or clues that the ice broke. Sure, it could have snowed over, but there was no little divots or anything like that. They just simply stopped. Next, they found his skis and his backpack, but no sign of the skier himself. Eventually, the search was called off, but his family held on to hope. A year later, they were rewarded when Stephen suddenly showed up at their doorstep, having little to no memory of what happened. He said earlier that day, he woke up hundreds of miles from where he disappeared in a field in Pittsfield. He was wearing clothes that weren't his, he had maps he didn't recognize, in a strange bag that also wasn't his. Stephen remained recluse and isolated after the incident and refused to undergo any offerings of hypnotic regression. Whatever happened, he had no desire whatsoever to remember it. Could it be that somehow Stephen traveled somewhere no one was supposed to go? It looks like not even Stephen will ever know.